G'day, welcome to the Green Left Show. Today we're talking about Labor's plan to make dramatic cuts to the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We're here with Graham Matthews. He's the National Spokesperson for Socialist Alliance on Disability Rights. Before we get underway, I do want to acknowledge that we're producing this show on stolen First Nations country, always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Also, if you like the work that we do, please do become a Green Left supporter if you're not already. This interview is conducted by Peter Boyle, so I'm going to hand it over to Peter to take it away.
What are your comments on the federal Labor government's proposed cuts to the National Disability Insurance Scheme?
I think in short it's a massive betrayal, and I think it'll have a catastrophic impact on people with disability. I think in the first instance, the 130,000 people who will be tossed off over the next number of years from NDIS, and it's an open secret that it's particularly younger people with psychosocial disability who will be affected, and they will lose all support completely, and it will have a dramatic impact on what they are able to do with their lives. Withdrawing support in that way and leaving people to fend for themselves is a recipe for social disaster. It's going to have an extremely detrimental impact on what they are able to do with their lives. As people with disability, we deserve the same opportunities as anybody else, as people with, as able-bodied people, as anybody else in the society, and that's all that we ask for, and that's all that NDIS was ever intended to do. The myth, I suppose, that NDIS is welfare, that somehow it's giving people with disability something that the rest of society doesn't have, is a lie. All NDIS does is gives us the opportunity to express our own lives and to pursue our own goals. From a personal point of view, I didn't experience the disability system before NDIS. I came to disability late in life, at the age of 50, and NDIS has been all that I've ever known. It's a deeply flawed system, but nevertheless it provides a foundation for people with disability to be able to access the community and have the particularly the social support, but also the basic care and daily living that they require to be able to be functional human beings in this society.
The Labor government justifies its proposed NDIS cuts with the arguments that, one, it costs too much, and two, that there's widespread rorting of the system by some service providers. How do you respond to this?
Yeah, I think taking the second one first, I think in terms of the cost, and it's around about $50 billion a year at the moment, which is well below what Australia spends on war, on the military. And in fact, the government is intending on ramping up that expenditure on the military in a practically uncontrolled way over the next 10 years or more, to well over $100 billion a year. And yet there is no accounting for that. It also ignores the fact that that budgets are choices, in the sense that it's not simply what's spent, it's also what's taken in, and how the taxation system works in terms of actually providing a social system that Australian, which all people really, deserve. And there are opportunities and there are choices that the government could make. It can, to their credit, the Greens have been calling for a 25% tax on gas corporations at least, and Socialist Alliance calls for the nationalisation of those gas companies, in fact of fossil fuel companies completely, which would give so much wealth back to society. At the same time, the Australia Institute is calling for a wealth tax of only 2% for those with assets of over 5 million, which is a tiny fraction of this society, that would raise tens of billions of dollars a year, which could then be used to fund the kind of social services, whether it's NDIS, whether it's a better unemployment support system, whether it's a better aged care system that I think people in this country demands. Unfortunately, and arguably, rorts is endemic to the way that NDIS was set up, in the sense that it's a for-profit system, and it's an uncontrolled for-profit system. It's dominated by large corporations that are making millions out of NDIS. Out of the total spending of NDIS, there's estimates that somewhere between 20 and 40% of that is simply profits for corporations. It's completely unnecessary and completely unsustainable in the way that the government has set up this privatised system, and totally unnecessary. And again, to their credit, the Greens have pointed out that the government is complaining about the rorting of NDIS funding, but at the same time, they're not properly funding the NDIS workers who actually investigate fraud. So there are real opportunities to address that. But systematically, there is an alternative to the kind of for-profit system where, frankly, over time, small corporations have been overtaken by larger corporations, and something like, for instance, the prosthetics industry. I'm a multiple amputee, and I rely very heavily on that, is dominated by two multinational corporations who charge absurd amounts to NDIS for some of the simplest prosthetic devices you could imagine. So there is an alternative to reorganise NDIS and to make it more community focused, and to put the control back to people with disability. And that's certainly, and I totally agree with Socialist Alliance's position on that it should be, NDIS should be under the democratic control of people with disability and their families. It shouldn't be under the control of bureaucrats, and it shouldn't be a system which is primarily designed to make profit for large corporations.
The kind of cuts that the government is proposing will also favour some of these bigger for-profit providers as against smaller and community-based providers. Is that the case? And if so, if you try to envisage a transformation of the system away from the domination of these big corporations, there would have to be some basic bottom lines guarantees.
Absolutely. Look, I think the history of NDIS, and it's now certainly been functioning universally now for around about 10 years. Obviously it was set up in 2013, but there were trials up until 2016, and in the last 10 years the history of NDIS has been a growing concentration of providers. You even see corporations like the for-profit health funds like NIB buying into and buying up some of the more profitable sections of NDIS, such as support coordination and plan management. And it's in nobody's interest for these major corporations to dominate the sector. There needs to be a transition. It needs to be a transition which is governed by people with disabilities themselves, retaining the choice and control that NDIS has at least partially delivered, but expanding the control and the flexibility for people with disability to be supported in the way that suits them, that suits their needs and aspirations, wherever they fit on the wide spectrum of disability. But it's not rocket science. It's not, there is a thriving community sector in this country. And there's a great deal of wealth of knowledge there that can be drawn upon. And in fact, I think, and again, the Socialist Alliance rejects, for instance, that there is any fundamental difference of need, I suppose, between NDIS workers and NDIS participants. And we see a great deal of commonality there, that people who work within NDIS, most of them deeply committed people who wish only the best for the disability community, and the NDIS participants themselves have the same common interests, which is that NDIS workers are properly paid, that they have fulfilling work, that they're well supported, and that they are able then to consistently support people with disability in a community environment.
Yes, state governments are point blank that they don't want to take back responsibility for dealing with disability services.
Yep.
And on the other hand, we have a federal government that's trying to cut its expenditure.
It's appalling. It's utterly appalling that, as you say, at the one time that the federal government is attempting to divest its role in disability, state governments are saying, don't give it to us. And this is part of the neoliberal crunch, that state governments are not properly funded to be able to provide the kinds of supports needed by people with disability, particularly young people. And that's where this crunch will particularly, I think, be noticed, is and in no small part in areas like childcare, like schooling, like youth work and so forth. There is a real potential to create a lost generation of particularly young people with disability who will fall through the cracks, no longer able to receive NDIS, and receiving, to all intents and purposes, nothing from state governments. And where do they go? The only potential is that they rely yet again on the family, that the entire thing is privatised to families supporting these young people with disability. And again, that was one of the main reasons that NDIS was set up, to not only allow the fuller lives and full expression of people with disability themselves, but also their families, and let's be honest, particularly the women who look after people with disability, to allow them also the choice and control of their lives. And by cutting back this funding, and the government, I'm sure, is quite clear on this, it will inevitably force that responsibility back on the home and back on women in particular, which is completely outrageous, unsustainable and unacceptable. It's untested what the impacts on, I think, the broader society will be, but it's certainly, it's a massive loss of potential. I mean, you know, people with psychosocial disability are not lesser than anybody else in society. And one thing that NDIS, in its own very distorted way, but has shown, is that by providing those supports to people in that situation, it enables them to do amazing things. And taking that away again, not only threatens, I suppose, the social cohesion or social fabric, but also takes away that massive potential of what people with psychosocial disability can give to society as a whole.
Thanks for joining us today on the Green Left Show. This brings us to the end of that episode. Big thank you to Graham Matthews and Peter Boyle for their time today. And as always, if you do like the work that we do, please do become a Green Left supporter if you're not already. It is the number one way to support our work and also to receive the content that we produce. We will see you next time on the Green Left Show.